The Sabbath Challenge. Patrick Madrid, a conservative Catholic scholar speaking on EWTN, Global Catholic Radio Network, and Abba, please be with us. Send your spirit, your Ruach, to guide all of our thoughts. And please give me clarity on what to share so the picture is able to be seen, because I can't I don't have any idea how to show this thing on the graphs and stuff on Telegram. So please fill in for me. Give people in their minds being able to see this thing, and thank you. Okay, so they, in January 2005-2006, answered the claim that the Catholic Church changed the day of worship from Saturday to Sunday with this statement: there was a distinct break between the Old Testament requirements dealing with the Sabbath worship. They wanted to show that Christianity was distinct from Judaism. The other thing we should remember too is that our calendar that we follow, including the Seventh-day Adventists, is not only a calendar that was devised by the Catholic Church, but also is a calendar that's based upon the solar year, not the lunar year. And the Jewish calendar that was observed in the time of Christ follows a lunar calendar. And I will clarify that the lunar calendar had to do with the Second Temple usurpers. It was not our Messiah's calendar. So the great irony is that even the Seventh-day Adventists themselves are not worshiping on exactly the same Sabbath day as the Jews in the time of Christ. This is a very serious challenge to us as Sabbath keepers. Is it possible that this Catholic scholar is correct? Is it possible that those of us who keep the seventh-day Sabbath on Saturday of the Gregorian calendar are not keeping the same Sabbath that our Messiah did? And I assumed at that time that he was keeping that same calendar, so please bear with me. We cannot take lightly or disregard this claim if we desire to properly represent our Heavenly Father's ways. He is in the process of restoring light to his children that has been obscured since the outpouring of the Spirit at Pentecost some 2,000 years ago. This challenge to our traditional understanding of Sabbath keeping on Saturday is not an emergency for our loving Heavenly Father and his Son. They made sure that evidence has been preserved in the historical records that will either confirm or disprove the claim of the Catholic scholar quoted above. We can trust that our Heavenly Father will make the truth of his Sabbath clear to his obedient, truth-seeking children. He will show us how his Son and his obedient children of our Messiah's time honored his Sabbath. So let us take the time, and I would clarify that he will expose how the disobedient kept the Sabbath right here, okay? So let us take the time to carefully and prayerfully consider this claim for our Heavenly Father's seventh-day Sabbath. Let us begin by noting the records of two historians that many Sabbath keepers believe will support us in keeping the seventh-day Sabbath on Saturday like the Jews do today. Saturn's Day, Josephus and Dio Cassius. Let us compare the writings of the Roman historian Dio Cassius, AD 150 to 220, with those of the Jewish historian Josephus, AD 37 to 100, concerning the wars between the Romans and the Jews. Dio Cassius's testimony shows that the Jews did not fight offensively on Saturn's Day during the Roman invasions of Jerusalem in 63 BC, 37 BC, and AD 70. Roman History, Book 37, chapters 16 to 17. Josephus, AD 37 to 100, wrote that the Jews didn't fight offensively on the Sabbath. Wars of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 7, Section 3, Book 2. Anyway, I have the addresses here, and Antiquities of the Jews. And if you note the dates here, with Dio Cassius, Roman invasions of Jerusalem in 63 BC, 37 BC, and AD 70. Now, this was long after the usurpers took the calendation away from the solar calendar. Okay, so this seems pretty straightforward. Historical documentation shows that the Jews were keeping the Sabbath on Saturn's Day, or Saturday. Why would anyone claim that observing Saturday on the calendar we have today is not what the Jews were doing in the time of Christ? Is there more to the picture than we might suspect? So digging deeper, and some of this has already been, Jeremy brought it up earlier, even today on this call, when he was going through his presentation. Saturn's Day was the first day of the pagan planetary week before and during the time of Dio Cassius. Dio Cassius, or Cassius Dio, he shows up in history with his name both ways. also wrote that Saturn's day was the first day of the planetary week. Then came Sun's day, Moon's day, Mars' day, Mercury's day, Jupiter's day, and Venus's day. And there are several references, I think many of which, especially Sunday sacredness and Roman paganism, many of which that Jeremy already covered earlier. Calendar perplexity. This information about the seventh-day Sabbath of the Jews being observed on Saturn's day, the first day of the pagan planetary week, leaves more questions than answers. How could the Jews have been keeping Sabbath on the seventh day of the week, while the Romans around them were claiming that they were keeping Saturn's day, which was on the first day of the pagan planetary week? Our Abba has faithfully left clues from history that will help us find the true seventh-day Sabbath that, now I will say, the usurpers honored while our Messiah walked the earth. Timekeeping history. Among all early nations, the lunar months were the readiest large divisions of time, and were divided into 4 weeks corresponding to the phases or quarters of the moon. In order to connect the reckoning by weeks with the lunar month, we find that all ancient nations observe some peculiar solemnities to mark the day of the new moon. Popular and Critical Bible Encyclopedia, 1904, page numbers noted. Sabbath and new moon, or Rosh Chodesh, both periodically recurring in the course of the year. The new moon still is, and the Sabbath originally was, dependent on the lunar cycle. Universal Jewish Encyclopedia, page 410. And then the Bible Encyclopedia Biblica, 1899 edition, says, this intimate connection between the week and the month was soon dissolved. It is certain that the week soon followed a development of its own, and it became the custom without paying any regard to the days of the month, that is the lunar month. And so that the new moon no longer coincided with the first day of the month. So that's again referring to what the usurpers were doing. And it's good that I'm able to catch this while I'm going. These Bible encyclopedias were published around the turn of the 20th century. They tell us that all early nations, and I would say that Israel was not necessarily an early nation that this would apply to at this point. They tell us that all early nations kept time according to the moon cycles, with 4 weeks within the months. These weeks may be referred to as quasi-weeks, in contrast to modern weeks, which are 7-day uninterrupted cycling weeks. The Universal Jewish Encyclopedia also indicates that the Jews, or the nation of Israel, kept the Sabbath according to the lunar cycle sometime in their past history, but that practice has changed. And apparently, they were keeping it during the last 160 years, BCE, or what they call BC, before the calendar change and got us into AD. So let's see if there's anything in history that might help us verify these claims. Is there some verifiable sense of when the early nations were keeping time by the lunar cycle, and what might have happened to change that practice? Now, this is something that has become very much a question for me, but the changes in calendation with what the usurpers have written about history. So please bear this in mind as I'm looking at it, as I'm sharing it. After about 700 BC, historical records of various nations' calendars around the world show that they added about 5 days to their year in various ways. Something apparently happened in the heavens to change timekeeping worldwide, and Immanuel Velikovsky documents this in Worlds and Collisions, the year of 360 days, pages 333 to 361. And then Ages and Chaos documents an additional 600 years mistakenly added to Egyptian history because of the confusion regarding the rulers' co-regencies. When that time is taken out, it coincides perfectly with Israel's history in the scriptures. This also indicates that the first recorded solar-only calendar in history, attributed to Egypt and thought to have begun around 1200 BC, didn't actually begin until after 700 BC. That I have in serious question, because of the what I've been learning recently. But now we can see that all the nations of the world, and I will say that our Abba's nation that came about after the Tower of Babel and all of the fallen angels worshiping, you know, the people worshiping all the fallen angels and their various calendars. They might have had these things, but our Abba's people didn't do that.